can't always make everything true to life. Sometimes you just have to make it look like something's there, even if nothing is.
Hmm. So,
Um, but yeah,
do
I
you
mean,
mind
this. Go
walking
ahead.
through like our your process? You know, of course, reference photo. I advise it's a lot of 3D artists. It's like as you're trying to figure out your skill set and trying to get as close as possible. Having references is like a huge component to that.
Mm.
The more you're guessing, the less realistic it's going to be. Do you mind kind of diving into that mindset as well?
So yeah, I mean, I'm agree with you completely. It's very difficult to work on anything without proper references, right? Like you can't model a tank or an automobile or a bicycle or a wall without proper references. You can try from memory, but most people can't even draw a bicycle from memory, right?
Mhm.
So have you ever seen that where like
Yeah,
somebody
yeah,
like
the
tells someone like,
yep.
Where everything
There was
goes.
like a thread. I think it was like a Facebook thread maybe or something
Hmm.
where there was like 8 or 9
yeah,
pictures of people who had drawn bikes from memory. Oh, hilarious.
yeah, and it ends up being like this weird amalgamation of random triangle shapes with a couple of
Yeah.
like wheels on it, and it just doesn't make any sense. But that's how people see these things. But like one thing I learned in art college was, and I'm glad I went for nothing else but this piece of advice, was draw what you see, not what you think you see.
Mm.
And that's always been kind of what I try to do with what I work on. Like, I'm not perfect, so occasionally I'm going to look at this block and maybe I won't measure it correctly when I go to make it in our software, but I'll at least get it close enough that it resembles what it is that I'm trying to make, right? So ultimately, I try to draw or create what it is that I see in front of me rather than what it is that I think I'm seeing. And sometimes
Yep.
I have to go back and forth and I'll measure things out in Google Earth. Like I literally measured this thing out and like got the exact dimensions from the edge of the trail over to here, just so like when I went in here and made it, I wouldn't have to guess at what it was that I was trying to do. How far these distances are determines what it's actually going to look like in the end. It's all
Right.
little stuff that all adds up to a bigger product in the end.
And your daughter was patient
I mean,
enough while you like, hold on a second, whoosh, and start, on the bike ride, whip out the camera, get reference photos. Is she used to that kind of behavior with
that's
you? I'm assuming you do reference stuff
yeah. I
all
mean,
the
that's her
time.
right there watching me.
Oh.
So
Come on, Dad.
she
That's
actually
cool.
she liked it too. She like loved this ivy so much that she even took her own pictures of it. So
Oh, nice.
uh, I think artistry kind of runs in the family line. So
That's wonderful.
it's patience is not like a terribly a virtue that we understand as much, but at least we understand art, so we have that going for us. Um, like I said, with patience, I'm sorry if I cut you guys off occasionally, but there's a little bit
No,
of a
no,
delay sometimes.
no. That's and
Um,
us as well. Again. Wow, look at that.
Now, with some of the things here, I even actually let me pull the references back up. I even tried to get the exact type of mud and whatnot underneath the little creek here on the side, and if I hide this, it should be a little bit more obvious. And you can look at it from like the unshaded or sorry the unlit view, where you can see like I tried to even get the same types of like pine needles and whatnot in there. We don't have Florida pine needles, but we have
Yeah.
stuff that looks similar enough to it that you can kind of pass it off. Um, and the water shader is just a basic Unreal Engine shader that I just kind of finagled with and played and tried to make it look as good as I could. Um, I think water is one of those things that's just really hard to get just right.
Mm.
Um, no matter how many times I play with it, like if I try to increase the depth of the water so that like it's easier to see beneath it, it just makes the reflections on top go away, stuff like that.
Mm.
So it's not a perfect implementation, but it's close enough that it at least passes as water, right?
It's beautiful,
Um,
man.
so yeah, I appreciate it. It took me a long time to work on this. So like I just worked on it pretty much every single day for a month, just thinking like I was hoping I could get this done in 2 weeks,
Hmm.
and I ended up taking I think it was closer to three,
Hmm.
just about 4 hours a night.
What was the first thing that you
So
started on after you had your reference material, though? Was it just like the big shapes and getting the walls and light right, or did you start importing the plants? Because a lot of the people that kind of watch us are still being introduced to Quixel Suite, the mixer, and to Megascan's library. So even if you had like here's my like 8-step workflow, even though it took the month or 2 months, I guess could you break down like just your steps in name? Oh,
sure,
here we go.
the
Here we
first thing
go.
I did literally was open up Mixer.
Okay.
So I have a beta version of Mixer that I don't want to open just yet because there's some features in there we probably shouldn't
gotta
show on camera in case they
understand.
get cut.
Breaking.
They added
But-
the legit make art button, and they don't want the world to see that it exists yet. So.
The Mixer for Jonathan version.
Oh yes. So let's see here. I should have one in here called. Here's what the stuff where I was actually working on it. I think it is this one.
There's the teddy button.
Nope, that's one of my crappy
Yeah.
tests. Teddy button. Maybe no, that was not it. Which one is this? Oh come on!
If you need us to blank your screen at any point for whatever reason,
No,
it's
no,
not
you're-
like in case like oh shit, don't show that.
no. This is the public version of Mixer. Nothing to worry
Okay,
about.
okay, cool.
The nice thing is the newest version of Mixer. One of the things I can talk about is that loading this project would have already been done by this point.
Oh, wow.
Nice.
So, yeah, that's another reason why I'm not showing it, because people will look at this video and say, "Why does mine load so slow?"
That's the
Oh, wow.
premium subscription
wrong
model.
with my computer? Oh, nice.
Exactly. Let's turn all this stuff off. That was me experimenting with paint masks. So I'll get to that point in a moment. But this is pretty much what I started with. This is all made in Mixer. Every bit of this is procedural with some scans laid on top.
Mhm.
And
I
of
love
course,
how
we have displacement
Mixer.
built in and all that.
Yeah,
Oh my
I love how
God.
Mixer like combine because I started being introduced to Quixel Suite tools with the Endu. Is it Endu?
Mhm.
I keep
I
some
call it
people say
Endu.
Endio.
I call it.
I say Endu.
I call it
and then
Endu,
Didu.
Yeah.
Right. And I
That's
love
not the
how
worst.
yeah.
I've heard a guy call it endo.
Yeah, I've heard people say it all the
Like a
time.
martial
Am I
arts.
saying it wrong? People have said ND0. I was like, where's the zero? Anyways,
Sorry.
I love how it combines a lot of those great features because making a normal map from scratch and not having the bake is still unchallenged in my opinion. Using you guys' suite, right? Like all the other
Yeah.
programs still makes it somewhat difficult where I just want to create a normal
look
map
at
on a
that.
planar field
Yeah.
and then start building from that. And it makes it so much easier with the Mixer. And I love that feature a lot.
This gives me hope.
So
'cause I'm the designer in the group, and I don't have like
Ah.
8 years to get good enough to actually do this level of stuff the old-fashioned way. But like, I get inspired to try every time I see somebody click 2 buttons and like, oh, I've adjusted the normal map, and like, oh, here's
Yeah.
me adding this layer and that layer, and it's like, all right, there's hope.
Yeah.
There's hope. Larry.
Yeah, it's idiot proof, Larry. So
Well, as far as like Endu goes, I mean, I'll let you in on a secret. I still work with Endu on System Shock for all the stuff that I'm building for the game.
Mhm.
There's times where it just doesn't make any sense to model something that I can paint in Photoshop in about 10
Right.
seconds. So
Exactly.
I'm all about efficiency. If I can get
Exactly.
it done in half the time, I'm going to do it because I'd rather get the game done faster.
Mhm.
But yeah, so as far as like Mixer goes right now, like here's the mask for what you're seeing, right? For this slab. So this is just literally like if I turn all these other layers off, this is just a pretty basic setup. It's just a simple mask displacing, and then there's a concrete layer applied to that, and then on top of that, there's some edge chipping and some damage that you'll see that are kind of constrained to the edges, and then a little bit of I call it staining in here, but it's more accurately known as like moss and or just road grime,
Grout.
is
Yeah.
pretty much. And then on top of that, I did some highlighting on the what is it? I think it's on the edges here. No, it's this one right here, or maybe it's not. Which one? That is this one right here. It's just not updating the viewport.
Oh,
Oh,
man.
it was 2 layers. Okay, cool. Just to like, even though we use PBR, it doesn't mean that you can't use some trickery to make this thing like display the way you want it to, right?
Mhm.
So like you'll notice that the gloss on this is set to nothing and the metalness is set to pure white.
Mhm.
Obviously this isn't metal, but because this combination of values pretty much produces nothing in response, like you can't even get a light feedback on it. That's what I wanted on this scene, so that there would be no light reflecting in those cracks.
Okay.
So sometimes you just have to play with the values, even if it's not physically correct, to make it look physically correct.
And
Is it-
just so, because I'm the ignorant one here, geometry wise, this is a flat plane. That everything else
Yeah.
is just mask applications. Wow. Okay.
Yeah, pretty much. It's just a literally a flat plane. And
That's not fair.
normally, yeah, like
Not
normally what you
fair.
do, like in the engine, is you could set this up with a displacement shader, which I did originally. And I took that out when I realized it's already running like crap now because this is all in real time. Like if I turn the frames on, I'm getting 15 to 10 to 15 frames on a 1080 Ti. Okay. And I realized quickly that if I was going to have this whole thing displaced, it wasn't going to work. So what I did was I just traced around the geo in Max, and I made what I would call poor man's displacement, where I just literally traced it and popped it out by hand. It does the exact same thing, except it's more accurate because you're not relying on like pixels matching up with geo, and it runs way faster, which is kind of nice when I'm trying to work on this thing and not, feel like I'm playing some kind of 1980s Pac-Man game.
Mhm.
So like it's all like chop, 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 chop moving by.
Mhm.
So,
And so-
it works. It's not
and-
fast to do it that way, but it works.
As far as like physical properties of like a displaced item, and this may be a little more gameplay centric than it is art centric, but creating these ridges or these perceived geometry, is it easy to also get things to interact or to collide with that, or do you actually have to still make your like collision layer respect the shapes properly if you want proper like bullet bounces and things like that?
Well, considering Unreal does the collision for you automatically, unless you tell it specifically that you don't need automatic collision, I think
Yeah.
if I could probably show the collision in here. It should be under buffer viz, if I'm not mistaken, or it's in here. One of these. I'll just pull up the mesh itself, and we can just look at it in there. But it should actually just make a pretty simple box around this.
Yeah. Okay.
And theoretically, it's just there it is right there.
I
That
think
little
I see the
green
edge.
outline.
Yeah. Exactly. Yep. Oh, it's
The nice thing about the way Epic set this engine up is that it's super simple and it does most of this for you. Like back in the UDK days, I had to do all this by hand, and that was
yeah.
not terribly fun.